Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Very good morning, everyone. Welcome to RSOG School of Government first webinar. Today's webinar is focused on learning in the new normal. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items and structure of our webinar session today. To maximize our sharing experience today, please mute your microphones. This webinar sessions is divided into 3 segments. First, we will begin with key questions posed to our panelists. Then, we will answer questions from participants. At any time during the webinar, you may submit your questions to the panelists. You need to just type your questions in the chat section. As time allows, we will address as many questions as possible. Lastly, we wrap up the session. We will be recording this webinar and we'll share the link on our website and social media. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Zulkarnain Haji Awang, who was formerly the Secretary General to the Ministry of Education Malaysia. Tan Sri is currently Chairman of Wing Tai Malaysia. Tan Sri was the lead evaluator and facilitator in RSOG School of Government recent leadership program, such as the New Age Leadership and Leadership Presence. Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamarul Nizam Abdullah is the Professor in National Security at the University Utara Malaysia. He is currently on sabbatical at Universitas Pasundan in Bandung, Indonesia. Professor Kamarul Nizam contributed immensely to the talent acceleration in the public service program a few years back. Recently, Professor appeared in our e-bulletin, the RSOG Insight, sharing views from Indonesia on life during the pandemic. Distinguished panelists, Tan Sri and Professor, let us get started. The first questions that we want to ask the panelists is, what is the difference in facilitating learning before and after COVID-19? I would like to invite Tan Sri to start first. Silakan, Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Thank you, Mr. Ismail. Basically, the new learning after COVID-19 will definitely change, because the traditional approach of learning, there is face-to-face communication or face-to-face interaction, may have some difficulties, and indeed have difficulty at the moment. Therefore, we have, in the past, we have the choice whether we have to do distant learning or we can go face-to-face. But especially in the near future, it's no more a choice. We have to come up with a new system. Otherwise, nothing can happen as what is happening now. The hospital is not functioning, the school is still closed, and the process of learning is almost not there formally. Therefore, we have to get away, or rather reduce the traditional approach. And this, of course, required a new commitment and discipline. And we have to have the so-called the learning all the time, anytime. But yet, you have to be formally structured, because the system is more or less there. It's a matter, before this, we don't make that choice because of a number of reasons probably we can discuss in the later part. And of course, traditional approach can be still effective, but may take a long time to come to a normal situation. Or at least we need some sort of very flexible system that can from time to time be shifted from one system to another, so that the learning should continue, because the time wasted on not learning is a real waste, So that's why we need the new system going, that is to more develop, well organized, and properly manage a distant learning.
Thank you, Tan Sri. What we gather from your response just now is that we have no choice but to roll out the new system. Can we get views from Professor Kamrul Nizam on the difference? Silakan, Prof.
Okay. Thank you very much, Razak School of Government, for inviting me to talk about, the new norms in the maybe post-COVID situation in our education learning environment. We are talking about learning environments before and after the COVID. So most of us has been in terms of the environment in the prior a situation whereby that it was before the COVID situations. So what we're together is that the education learning environments in the pre-COVID environment was we interact physically, that student interact with the student which interact with the lecturers or with the teachers. There was a kind of some spontaneous kind of interaction between students, knowing your student, knowing your lecturer, knowing your supervisor, knowing your teachers. And I found it's very interesting because we can have a kind of a brainstorming kind of environments, during that kind of situation. So there was also a kind of emotional attachment, to the students, student to the teachers, because we are physically involved. We know the student, we know the background of the student, we can read students' problems, and the student also can be attached to their lecturers or to their teachers. But for me as an educator, when we had the classes, and sometimes you had to replace the classes. That was the difficulty sometimes, because professor, sometimes we have to move around. We have to move around. We have invitation to attend to, and etc. So we have to replace our classes. But fortunately, in Malaysia, we already introduced what we call it blended learning environment, meaning that we can introduce at least 40% distance learning and 60% face-to-face kind of what they call it classes. So this is a kind nothing new to the Malaysian education environment. But since I'm staying in Indonesia, this is a problem that the Indonesian students are facing. They are quite new to this kind of environment. So when I involved in the teaching environment in Indonesian University and Institute of Higher Learning during the COVID period, so they are actually grappling with this kind of situation in terms of to set up the kind of online mechanisms, online resources and all that. And the problem is that students are also not prepared with this kind of environments. So the challenge that I will talk later, but I think this is a new norms that we are facing with, either in Indonesia or Malaysia. But for me, at least in the Malaysian university environment, this kind of situation, at least we already used to, a kind of online meeting, online teaching and all that. Up to you.
Thank you, Professor. From what we have gathered from Tan Sri also earlier, it seems that some of the initiative that we see today has been in place previously. But this current situation require us to accelerate this new way of learning even faster. And as compared to Indonesia, we probably experience a softer landing. We're going to move to the second question, which is, what are the challenges faced so far? For this question, can I invite Professor Kamrul Nizam to start first? Silakan, Prof.
I think there are many challenges that I'm facing with now, especially when I'm now in Indonesia, you know, with this kind of new environment. Number one is a problem of interpersonal communications. They are lacking in the online communications. You know, it seems to be a kind of limited interaction and discussions. Just like what you are doing now, for example, you know, that I have in class, you know, that everybody involved in this kind of Zoom and all that. But I cannot see them, you know, simultaneously in terms of whether they are alert or not, whether they are sleeping or not, or whether they are doing other than what I'm doing. You know, sometimes I feel that this is a kind of one-way communications. You know, for me, because there's no interactions. You know, I cannot see their face. You know, especially when there are many students, 40 students. There are a kind of, I think, some video conference that can have, you know, concurrently about 40 to 50 faces. But you can see in their face, sometimes they are very sleepy and all that, you know. If it in a physical class, I can scold them, you know. Just so suddenly I will ask the questions, you know, right, so that I have to make sure that they're alert or not in my lecture. But it's quite difficult for me in this kind of online communication. Sometimes, you know, their lines, you know, so sudden when offlines, you know, and it's quite difficult for them to reconnect to the line. And this is, I think, this is the problems I think that we're going to face in the future if this kind of pattern continues. You know, that I'm a very traditionalist in terms of teaching environments. I believe in terms of, you know, we can have a combinations of, you know, online and also physical, you know, face-to-face. But I don't believe in online, you know, 100%. Because in education, we are building a character of the students. We are building a knowledge of, you know, we are transmitting a knowledge for the students. You know, students need to interact, students need to ask, you know. In the online situation, it is quite difficult for students to interact unless they interact with the lectures, you know, separately. But even that is quite difficult for me. That when you have a kind of physical interaction, you know, the idea is you can have more ideas in terms of in the discussion rather than online. Because for me, while I'm giving a lecture, it is, you know, I have to ensure that all the schema, you know, the scheme of the lecture is delivered. You know, I cannot go beyond and that, beyond that. And this is also based on my what do you call it, experience while doing this online. You know, we have online lecture, we have online presentation, we have online exam. You know, the problem is that, you know, and we also have an online assessment. You know, one of the bad product of the online in terms of presentation and also examination is about plagiarism. You know, you cannot have a kind of sit-in exam anymore. So it's quite difficult to test students' knowledge. You know, and when you have an online, you know, you have to have a take-home exam. 95% of all online examinations submitted to me are basically, if I test it, run through the turning test, you know, they are already cut in piece. You know, I mean, having a kind of 35 experience, you already know when they are wrote in English and all that, you know, it's a perfect English and all that. You already know that this is them, it's not them. It's basically, you know, this is not their ideas. You know, you just shadow from the others, you know, just put it in there and all that. So I don't see a kind of critical thinking of the students, you know, and the knowledge they see is just on from what from the websites, so they didn't have the initiative to read the paper, to read the journal articles and all that, whereby for them it's quite difficult. They cannot go to the library and all that. There's an online journal article, but basically online journal you have to pay the good one, so it's quite difficult for them to get an access to that kind of journal. They can access to journal online, supported by the university, but university cannot support all journal online because of the hefty price that the university has to pay. And when they make a presentations, they are everywhere in Indonesia. Some of them in Makassar, some of them in Sumatra and all that. So they cannot discuss in terms of the coherence of the presentations, the continuity of presentation, because physically they are separated. Quite difficult for them to discuss further, So when I ask questions, they cannot. I have to leave the online the online websites, the Zoom, for example, so that they can answer the question without me, for example. So this is a kind of challenges that I think that that we are facing with, which I don't believe in 100% online. There must be a kind of physical interaction with the lecturer, so that assessment of the student is not about the product of it, but it is also how you see the development skills of the student physically. Then you can assess the student.
Very good points, Professor. Tan Sri, you have been in this business of learning for long. Would you like to share your thoughts on what the challenges so far today?
Well, I've been involved with training as well as in education for about 20 plus years. And from the issue that come about, I can think of about at least 6 challenges. The most important, which is long-term, is the worldview in terms of learning. How do we see learning? Because in the past, it's always been that it must, between Plato, Aristotle, it's always been teacher and student. How could this worldview change as such that learning is not just, as I agree with Professor that it should be a mix, it's not just that, but equally important is this continuous learning through other means, and especially with the current technology. So that worldview need to be changed. Otherwise, it's not easy to change the teacher or professor or whatever to move. Not easy to move everybody, because some are still, with the old worldview. If you want to be successful, this and of course this take a long time. Secondly, related to that is of course the culture of education, because in this current situation, current technology, that is not culture, is not necessary. You can learn in many ways, because the most important thing is whether you get the knowledge or the values or the expertise. And of course, it's not just, I agree with Professor, it's not just the end, but the process is quite important. So if we have to look at this culture shift from traditional face-to-face to something like mixed distance or blended learning, whatever, then we can start the thing going, not be necessarily be perfected. This is again related to expertise. I don't know, I'm dealing with teachers and some lecturers, whatever. I'm still chairman of private university. It's saying that many of our trainers or teacher, whatever it is not equipped with the right expertise to get this thing going. This is not to mention the new curriculum they have to develop. Some are still, the old way of doing things, the old curriculum of those things. And of course, the new pedagogy that we have to involve. When they say distant learning, sometimes just say, no more distant learning, the boring thing, because boring can be not just through distant learning, boring can be face-to-face also. Some teachers can be very boring, Professor. And I know there are a lot of complaints. So the expertise to develop this, to develop the new way of teaching. It's not, is it going to be just a lecture, a community lecture, some video, to make it animation, whatever, to make learning interesting. You can see that among little children, for example. They can learn a lot. You look at your grandchildren, they're learning a lot just through some videos, some cartoon and those things. They are there and they can speak the language better than going to the class, for example. This reflects, that's what I call a culture change and require expertise. And some of the professors, lecturers, trainers, whatever, need to undergo the process of relearning, reteaching. Otherwise, they become, something that been seen to be a bit, difficult to handle under stress situation. And fourthly, is the infrastructure. Professor rightly said that at the moment, even I'm staying in Petaling Jaya, the connection can be on and off. It can be very frustrating. Despite the fact of this, therefore, to make it happen, the connectivity, helpful technological solution, also platform and resources are very important to be developed. That need to be done, of course. And that will cover, of course, equity in access and those things. Because in rural area, I asked my daughter, who is a lecturer at a university, why don't you do all these things? They said, it's not fair because some of those people in rural area, they are not accessible to all these facilities. So again, these are constraints. And also equally important, as Professor said, how do we develop quality control in this sense? Quality control for this type of learning. It cannot be just free for all. Some are purely commercial and without even thinking of, what do the right quality that you have. So who will be responsible for the quality control of this process, including assessment process? How do we assess people if they do it? Is it normal assessment or how do it? Or still when there is assessment required, they have to be face-to-face or whatever. That needs to be looked as a real challenge, which is, I don't think at the moment, not many people are looking into the process of quality control in terms of the new approach. And of course, number 6 is the commitment of government or organization or society as such. Because, for example, you want to do, I'm involved with training of civil servant, for example. If you need training, then then probably in a week or a month, there must be time allocated for self-learning. And what type of self-learning? Who will supervise on that? So, for example, you don't need to go to institute, but maybe every 4 hours a month, everybody in the office will go through this process of learning and each go through various programs that suit them. But it can be flexible. Those are interested in finance, they go for finance. If they're interested in leadership, they go for leadership. Depend not only what they're interested, but what the authority or the organization want them to improve in their service. So there are a number of challenges. But if this is realized, of course, it's not easy. Not easy because of course they always say new curriculum, whatever. To me, the most important in education, the most effective, the most important thing is the teachers. How do the teachers handle things? You can have bad curriculum, good teachers, things can be better. If you have good curriculum without good teachers, I think can go wrong. So those are some of the things that require. Of course, how rapid can be a shift in technology that we involve. It's not just a normal, it mean that distance learning means just face-to-face like what we do now. You need something more than that to make it more interesting and effective. I think that's all at the moment.
Well said, Tan Sri. What we gathered so far is that the challenges that we are facing is well beyond cost and infrastructure. We are facing challenge in terms of quality control, in terms of the culture shift, the mindset, and so on, and the readiness of the people that involved in this learning experience. Tan Sri, Professor, we have discussed about the differences, the challenges, and we want to ask you the third and the last question. What else do you plan to facilitate learning in the future? For this last question, we invite Tan Sri to start first. Silakan Tan Sri.
Hello? Sorry.
What we have come to the third question, which is what else do Tan Sri plan to do to facilitate learning in the future?
Well, I would say not myself. When I say what we should do, it involves everybody. First is straight away, I think we need reorientation in our training. Otherwise, especially, we do not know how long this thing will last. I mean, we come back or there may be a new thing. So quickly, for example, at the moment, let's say people cannot go for training. For example, because I'm familiar with National Institute of Publication, there's no courses. Of course, there's existing courses, but there's no alternative plan. This actually, they should take opportunity when people are logged in. Then there'll be a lot of training for civil servant. Don't just, you stay on, log in, nothing to do there. Become very boring. This is a time where quickly, for example, the government should come in, okay, everybody who are not going to work, we do the training, for example. And this require early preparation of possibility. In the past, probably we don't predict all these things happen. But now, as it already happened, we have to prepare for the future, saying that, okay, if things go wrong, quickly shift to a new system. If we can do, as Prof was saying, that we can do face-to-face, okay, well and good. Come face-to-face is also effective, but look at the more effective mean of this sort of training. Some training program involving very technical things, finance, and all those things, can be easily be given priority first, because that sometimes is easier to learn through online, whatever distance, than facing the lecturer themselves. I mean, 300 people facing the lecturer. Sometimes they just take photograph of the lecturer, or they take all the videos, whatever it is, and try to listen to it. So that is it. And of course, organization at the point of receiving, they must get prepared and prepare program of training. Of course, this is not easy because they themselves are not having that training. How do we train people, every people, and when they should be trained and all this thing. So quickly that should come up, and there should be a program of reorientation of trainers and giving re-education so that they quickly can do it. Because some can do it. For example, even now, some do it, some don't. Right. Because some don't know how to do it. They have to get their son or their daughters to do it for them, to help them. And this is because some people like me, of course, is quite outdated in that sense, and there are many more people like me, and need for the reorientation and training, of course.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Professor Kamrul Nizam, would you like to offer some views? How do we go about the future?
Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to highlight and agree to some of the I think points that highlighted by Tan Sri, that in terms of our future training, first is about the infrastructure. That one is very important. That the advancement of technology needs a kind of excessive investment in terms of infrastructure. So the question that whether you are ready, whether universities are ready, whether the governments is ready to invest more on this kind of infrastructure. Why? Because we still have this kind of problems in terms of connectivity. Secondly, this is a kind of future planning. We need a kind of a very innovative and creativity in terms of human capital development and training. You know, that like what Hansley said, that we need to retrain, retool. Sometimes we have to retool them. You know, even myself, I mean, I have to be retooled in terms of my exposure to technology. All the Zoom and all that, you know, it's quite new to me. Although, I mean, I've been involved in blended learning for many years. This is, you know, how to train them is a very kind of critical issue. Like what Tansi said, you know, some these are old schools, you know, they never want to be a kind to be exposed to this kind of training method. Even old professors is basically, you know, they rather have a kind of, you know, having a kind of face-to-face. They don't want to distance learning. They don't want to have a blended learning. But because for them that using technology is kind of scary for them, you know, on that. But bear in mind that, you know, in our future planning, once we have a good infrastructures and a good investment on human capital, we're going to reduce costs, you know, for the future development. You know, we can reduce costs. You know, meeting, we don't have to travel. You know, I always have to travel to Putrajaya to have a meeting in Kementerian Pengajian Tinggi and all that. You know, now is, I mean, the university has to support my flight, my what do you call it, my hotel and all that. But you know, in the future, we don't need that. You know, even meeting can be done during the weekend or during week time, you know, odd time, you know, rather than during the what do you call it, during the office time. So this is a kind of new culture that we have to adapt it. I think fourthly is basically that this is where that blended learning or the mixed learning, you know, has to be emphasized, you know, in all the trainings, you know, in education and all that. Because for me, that I believe is the mixed environment, the blended learning, you know, blended learning in terms not only online, you know, in the university, we introduce a kind of, sometimes we have a projects, we have students have to go out, you know, during their, you know, learning time, you know, they can have a visit and all that, you know, they can have a video presentation and all that. This is a kind of blended learning. But at the same time, I think face-to-face is also important because like what I mentioned just now, that education is to build human character and knowledge. You know, it's not, you cannot rely on technology. Technology is to facilitate. You know, technology cannot replace human socialization because the implication of technology might affect, you know, the socialization of human beings. You know, we already experience it now. You know, for example, handphone in our children's, you know, what they call it, they are playing all the Nintendo and all that. You know, this is a kind of culture sometimes that we as the old school see that, you know, if our student, you know, just focus on handphone, you know, when they are a visit and their family on that, everybody, when we have a visit, for example, you know, Hari Raya visit, everybody looking at the handphones. You know, there's no time for socialization. So this is a bad technology that we have to get rid of. You know, the culture of bad technology, the culture of the bad culture of technology that we have to get rid of. So they are something that we cannot avoid in the future in terms of the advancement and technology. But there must also be a kind of human intervention on technology advancement. We cannot rely on technology per se. You know, we have to intervene so that, you know, human will not be a kind of victim to their technology advancement. This is, I think, that is very important for our future planning, future planning and future training. At one end, that we accept that technology, you know, the environment that we have now, that we have to rely more on the technology. But at the same time, you know, we cannot deny the fact that, you know, human being is a human being. You know, we need to have a kind of a development of human being that would not be succumb to the advancement of technology. That's all I think.
Thank you very much, Professor. We have started to receive feedback and questions from the participants through our chat section. I would like to read the first question, which comes from Ms. Ida Sharina from the Ministry of Environment. According to her, shouldn't we also see this crisis as an opportunity to enhance our teaching and learning method? Tan Sri, would you like to respond on that?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Otherwise, the new teaching method, people have tried to introduce the new teaching method for a long time, but somehow not much takers for various reasons. One is for the supply side, of course, the other demand side. The demand side are not prepared. The supply side is not introducing what Professor was saying, that a system that can humanize technology, which is not, they become very stern, very stiff. So this is the time and opportunity for us to make this significant shift from the traditional, due to the environment. That is, we do not know, we're going to face more and more environment, communication, everything. So significant shift must be made to assure that this mixed approach is properly developed, so that in the worst case scenario, we cannot do face-to-face, we can still always shift to distant learning as such, through more humanized curriculum, more humanized approach, a mixture of lecture, videos, animation, something that is very attractive for people to pay attention to that sort of training. Thank you.
What about Professor Karunizam? How do you see this?
Just what I highlighted just now, that university already, Institute of Higher Learning already done that in terms of our mixed learning, in terms of sharpening our, reviving our learning method. That in our curriculum development, this is where a mixed method have been applied. I'm not very sure. Maybe Ida, when during her time, that always face to face, but under the current instruction from the Ministry of Higher Education, we need to have a mixed learning. Like what Tan Sri said, it's kind of bored to have a kind of face to face kind of learning method.
Sure.
But at the same time, the government, the ministry already enhanced its teaching and learning method, to make more interesting to the student. But I'm not very sure in our secondary and primary school whether they have a kind of embrace this kind of method.
Thank you, Professor. There is this question that says, how can learners instill self-discipline in learning in the new normal? Would you like to respond, Professor?
This is a kind of very subjective, subjective issue. Self-discipline is yourself. It's about how you develop your own character. How you what do you call it? Basically adhere to discipline that you yourself develop. Self-discipline is the honor of oneself, but at the same time there are strategies on self-discipline. I mean, I'm not a kind of Mr. Motivator that can teach you how to become self-discipline, but self-discipline is basically is what do you call it, self-discipline is a pattern today I'm going to eat, for example, I'm going to eat, I have to have a dinner before 8 o'clock, by 7 I have to have a dinner, So you yourself have to stick to that same kind of self-discipline that you're going to have a dinner at 7 o'clock, Then if you break that kind of self-discipline, you have to punish yourself, for example, So this is a kind of regular pattern that you have to adhere to, that you have to discipline yourself. You have to stick to that. Otherwise, even you have a kind of Mr. Motivator try to motivate you on self-discipline. If you are not following that kind of regular regimes, there's no such thing as a self-discipline.
What about Tan Sri on self-discipline?
Well, as Professor was saying, it's not easy. But let's say during the month of Ramadan, you want to khatam Al-Quran. You must have objective, isn't it? You want to khatam, so you discipline yourself. And it is related to rewards. You finish reading Quran, you get certain reward. Not now, probably hereafter. So discipline is also related, first, to me, is the objective. You have clear objective, you want to improve yourself. What are the things that you can, that are been offered for you in order to prove yourself? For example, you want to improve your communication skill. When you have to have a target that you can do better. Because remember, one very senior officer who can't speak English well, but he want to improve his English speaking competencies. He go to the class almost every week, and within 6 months he can improve. I would say 95% improvement. Meaning, what do you want? And of course, reward again. And this is very important, especially for organization to discipline the officers. Give them, okay, on every, let's say every Friday, 11 to 12, everybody go for self-learning. And they must report, what do they learn? Report, what do they learn? What do they learn from the process? So everybody has to come up with a report, say 1-page report from that period that they've gone through learning. What do they learn? How could that learning process improve the organization, for example? That helps in terms of discipline people, not just self-discipline, but other discipline you in that sense. So I think this is required that I've said earlier about the worldview and culture. Just like for reading, you discipline yourself. For example, I make myself to make sure that I read at least 1 book a month, at least, whatever. Finish a book page to page. If you can't finish that, you have to recover the next month. So you can do it. I think if there is that willpower that you want to prove yourself in, and you know exactly which area you want to improve, you can slowly instill that discipline of learning.
Thank you, Tan Sri. We have a very
I
interesting...
I agree with Tan Sri that we must have an objective. If you want to be a self-discipline, you must have an objective. Even in your life, you must have an objective. Otherwise, nothing can be done. And we also have to have a willpower. It's not just a kind of hangat tai ayam and all that. Right. You must have a willpower. And thirdly, I think that I need to add what Tan Sri has said is that you must have the determinations. The determination and willpower that force you to be disciplined yourself. And this is a very important in terms of self-discipline. Otherwise, nobody can help you in terms of self-discipline. Only yourself can discipline.
Thank you, Professor Tan Sri. We have a very interesting question from Public Service Department. I read it to you. As we are moving towards IR 4.0, before these people are concerned about losing jobs to technology, will this new norm and technology development will replace most of our jobs?
Okay, IR 4.0 is nothing if you don't have that technology. If you don't have they call it the bread and butter. It's just a process. What do you want? To me, IR 4.0 is helping to facilitate certain things that you want. Because some people are talking about 4.0, everybody's talking about it. But so what? So what? For example, you want to use this to sell the product that you have or to process a product. You don't do that. You don't have that. It's nothing. This is the danger that I see facing many civil servants or whatever. When people say 4.0, everybody 4.0 without really understand exactly what do they want to deliver. The end products or the process, I think it's a process. So the end product. So your end products is to improve the performance of say one civil servant. Then you can use process as a process at 4.0, but you have to have what is the training plan? What is the career plan for them? What will be the competency that require from them? How to get that report, everything. Is it that can help you to facilitate to assure that that person progress? And what happens if they don't progress, for example? Of course, that you can, with the help of 4.0, that will expand further the realms of thinking, the realm of doing things, and the way that we look at things, away from the traditional approach. See the yearly assessment or those things, which can be sometimes can be biased, depend on how close you are with your boss or this thing. But is there any other means that you can develop a person and also use that IR 422 to plan for career path for somebody? What happened to them? And also the process of who will be the future leaders in the organization, for example. How do you develop that? How you go through? How you shift the one that is capable of certain things as again the others.
Professor Kamrul Rizal?
Yeah, this is, I think, relate to my early arguments on that. I argue that technology is to facilitate, not to replace human beings. And when you look at the history of industrial revolutions, that the steam, electricity, the automation and all that, has this all technology replaced humans, humans' job and all that? No, it just facilitate, helping human beings. On that note, I think I agree with Tan Sri. When we're talking about IR 4.0 in terms of intelligence, the technology is to facilitate, to help us. It's not that to replace human beings, because who are the behind all this technology are all human beings. So this is why I also argue that, do not rely on technology per se. For example, look at the technology of aviations. When we rely on all sort of automations, the plane go down. Look at the Boeing 737 incident and all that. This is basically that, for me, that human intervention is there. Human has to control. Human is not the victim of the technology and technical advancement. So when we're talking about IR 4.0, is basically, it does not change. There are certain things that will change humans. Socializations, in terms of the process, in terms of job socialization and all that, but it does not basically replacing humans in terms of their everyday life, but it's facilitate human beings.
Allow me to go to the next question. How educators can ensure the learning quality with all the handicaps face? Prof, would you like to start first?
I think this is the challenge that we are having now. Previously we had a blended learning, whereby that we still can have evaluate students' capability, performance and all that, by having another what they call it, face-to-face interaction and all that. But during the COVID, that this is the major challenges that we have. This is basically, nearly a kind of a 100% distant learning that we're going to have. Then the educators, they have to adapt to that. How to maintain the quality of the students, for example. It is highlighted by Dr. Ansari. Then how to retool the ability of lecturers, educators in this kind of environments. And this is, I think, that we have to sit down together, all those that having stake in this kind of sector. They have to balance up they think of, you know, maintaining the quality and the quality of education, but at the same time, you know, we need to adapt to the new environments of this kind of technology. This is a very challenging that I think after this that a lot of discussion will be focused on that to balance up with the human capital development, but and also the advancement of the technology, given the new environment that we are having.
Point taken, Prof. Tan Sri, I gathered a few questions relating to infrastructure for your attention because you were in the government before. The questions are about special allocation, giving up laptops, or kind of assistance for the people who involved in this learning business to gain new expertise and so on. What is your thoughts on that, sir?
My experience giving laptop to teachers in hundreds and thousands, and I don't think more than 20% really utilized. The others are being used by the children, or stolen by somebody else, misplaced, whatever. Because more importantly, it's not the laptop that make you work. Of course, it helps later. But first, some are very, you know, they're afraid of the laptop. They say, once you're given laptop, they become a burden already. So you're burden. So you add burden to the teachers, for example. No, it's supposed to be facilitated. So most important thing that to the culture of shifting the way we teach to make it more interesting. I strongly believe that this new learning process that facilitate learning can be more interesting than just purely face-to-face. You know, some of the teachers are so boring. So in fact, we can utilize expertise. For example, we don't need 10,000 good math teachers to teach good math. What we need is maybe 20 good experts in math who can develop the way of teaching that can be shared for everybody. And the teachers only have to facilitate the students that use the teaching by those teachers, for example. But they do expertise through maybe the videos, a mixed video, those teachers were teaching, but the ordinary teacher will be standing around to help some of those people. And we need less resources to do more. Of course, it's not easy because it involves cultures, it involves willpower to push people around. And there's so many who, you know, once you got a computer, it's an extra burden. We in the mind, without even trying it's already a burden. So probably that one can be written off in a way, but a young one, the university should train them to develop, for example, training for teachers by university. They should look at new approach of learning. I have to say this. I make one university asking them, they were teaching, they were training English teachers, for example. I said, but 60% of the class activity, classwork, or subject they took was in Malay. And you have this problem of teachers who are good in English but cannot teach language well. But he's trained to be English teacher because, you know, if a person is a good command of language, he can make joke in that particular language. Otherwise, class is so boring. She can't. And what happened to the class? They're so boring. 2 hours classes. So, whole orientation, even universities have to change the way they train the teachers. So that at the end, the student benefit from the training. Right?
And Sri, Professor, we wish we can continue this discussion, but the time may be not in our side at the moment. Before we end, we would like to get some last word from Tan Sri and Professor. What are the 3 skill sets that the people who involved in the business of learning need to have to survive in this new normal? Tan Sri?
One is, of course, the command of technology,
Right.
meaning they can use the technology properly, effectively, which is a mixed approach to it. Mixed approach, a combination of animation, all those things, they'll be command of that. And of course, before that happen, they have to have that orientation and training for themselves.
Right.
So reorientation, retraining, rejuvenate, whatever you can call it, but many of those require that. And some already have. It's a matter of pushing them a little bit, giving them facilities, and support them, and probably reward the one that do well, for example.
Right.
And thirdly, of course, the willpower, whether you want to really change or you don't want to change the way you approach. But the traditional approach is definitely winning out and slowly may be partly relevant in the process. Right?
So
Okay.
willpower, command of technology.
Yeah.
Did I miss
And
the
development
second one?
of self-expertise, including
Yeah,
communication skill, all those things, or the skills, the basic skill as a trainer or a teacher. Because I know even some professors in the old day would never get a training as a trainer. They just learn on the job. They never been trained how to be a trainer. So every time they start reading the old notes all the time, and not maybe the first, second, third row will be giving attention. The balance will doing their own way. And nowadays it's easier because they can just video and don't need to listen to the teacher. Or sometimes people share videos. You don't need to go. I'll share you the videos. Get somebody to do it. In other words, the process is really helpful. Similar to the one without the teacher seeing face to face with the teacher. Just get video, that's it. After that, the teacher just stand there for 2 hours and just go. Bye-bye. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Tan Sri. What about Professor?
Okay, I agree with whatever Tan Sri is saying that, but for whatever, jobs that we have, or, what we are doing, number one, I always believe that we must have a passion on that our job.
Okay.
Without passion, like what, you want to be a teacher. Why you want to be a teacher? Because there's no other job. Then I want to become a teacher. So it's not a passionate, whatever that you're doing, you must have passion in yourself. It's very important for me. Otherwise, you cannot go on, Once you have passion, then you have the ability actually to have a kind of innovation and creativity in teaching method. So you're going to have a kind of change. Style of teaching cannot be the same all of the time. The way that we transmit ideas, we transmit knowledge must be changed throughout time. So we must have a kind of innovation and creativity. How are we going to produce that kind of transmission? And lastly, I think already mentioned by Tan Sri that, in education, whatever it is, you must have a kind of ability of adaptability to challenge to the new culture, new technology, and new environments. Then, you can go on with yourself. It's not only in education, it's all in any sector that I think these kind of three factors are very important for all of us to excel in life, in also in our jobs. Thank you.
Well said, sir. We would like to thank to both panelists, Professor Kamarul Nizam and Tan Sri Dr. Zulkarnain, for spending time with us today. We also thank the participant for taking part. We value your views and feedback. We apologize for any shortcomings. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish selamat berpuasa. Selamat Hari Guru to our teachers. Please follow us on social media for future session. Till we meet again, please take care, stay safe, and thank you. Assalamualaikum. Jumpa lagi.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.